fellow cinephiles, welcome back. Today I'll be reviewing the new Final Destination Bloodlines. When this film was first announced, I was a bit hesitant about it because I was a fan of the other films, but I didn't want just another sequel, you know what I mean? The first three were solid, as like I've mentioned in the previous video, as a trilogy, and I just didn't want to have another sequel like that. But when I found out it was going to be following a family, and the family being affected, like a bloodline of a family being affected by what has transpired for them in the past, it got my interest going. I was intrigued by what they were trying to do, and my intrigue and interest and excitement sort of took over with this film, and I was really looking forward to watching it anyway. And I was really impressed with what I saw. It took something that was very familiar, that we'd seen in the previous films, and tried something different with it. Having the bloodline, having the family was a great introduction and something a bit different, and it allowed the creators to go in a different direction, or any direction they kind of really wanted to. And I would love to see more of it. And it delivered on certain things. There was many questions, as you saw in the other video that I had, and for the most part it answered a lot of them, but also gave me a lot more questions. There are things that are answered, but there are things that are introduced, or other things that aren't quite revealed that I really wanted them to. But in saying that, I still really enjoyed this film, and it's definitely one of the best sequels we've had, and it's on par, maybe a little less, with the first film. I feel this is definitely one of the better films that have come out of this series besides the original movie. And something kind of interesting with this, there was two directors doing it, two different directors, but they worked really well together and created this unique style and some interesting sort of death scenes in the film. It was really creative what they were able to accomplish. And it was co-written by Scream 5 and 6 and Ready or Not writer by Guy Busick. It was directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein. And the film followed the story of Stephanie Reyes, a college student who inherits a sudden premonition and attempts to save her entire family after death starts killing them off one by one because they should never have existed. Like I've mentioned a couple of times, this, unlike the previous films, has a real long connection. With the other films, it was really about one person having some sort of vision or seeing something in particular and stopping tragedy happening and saving particular lives of random people who ultimately have to come together to work out what's going on and try and help each other. Where this was really focused on the family. It wasn't a random group of people brought together. It was a group of families, a disjointed family and a large family nonetheless, but it still was trying something a bit different in that regard. And having this Stephanie character be the one have a vision. I like what they did with the Stephanie character in the particular vision that she has, and how that sort of differed from what we'd seen previous, and how it wasn't really her vision, but it was somebody else in her family this vision was passed on to her. That aspect was really good. I still have questions about how these people have these random visions. Is someone helping them? Whatever. This doesn't really answer that, but it does sort of go into a bit more of how all of this began. How did death start doing these things? And how did these people start having vision? I like that it's a disjointed family. There's family members that aren't accepted, and there are other family members that are sort of shunned upon, and I kind of like that sort of aspect, because a family and human component to the movie that, except for the first one, felt like it was kind of missing through the series. The cast was filled with a lot of newcomers and sort of known actors, and they did a really solid job. Everybody had a really good part in the film. My favourite by far was Tony Todd. This was his last appearance. He played the same character he'd played in the previous films, 1 and 2 and 5. And sort of really we got to see the conclusion of his story, so to speak, and I liked that. It was sad, but sort of beautiful as well. It was sad because Tony Todd at the time, this was just not long before he died, and he was really, really sick. He had cancer, and when you see him, he looks so skinny. It's sad to see him so sick like that. But it's beautiful because it's like a great send-off. He has these really great moments. He says something in the film about talking about death and a variety of things that really felt very real for him, and the experiences he was having in real life, and how he injected that into his performance. And it has a really good, beautiful goodbye in a way. And I love what they do here. I think it's a really wonderful way of paying tribute to this great sort of unique actor who's been in this series for so long, and allow him to have one last, moment in the sun, so to speak. And he really is the performance that steals it for me, and I really love what they do with him. And he answers some questions that I've had, which I thought was really great as well. It has some of the best, maybe the best, deaths in the whole series. They're just creative and original and unique, and there's so many different things that happen. There's a sequence with an MRI machine turned way up, and the like magnetic field sort of that comes along with that is so creatively and interestingly and funnily used in this particular sequence. And the film is filled with sequences like this. There's one involving a garbage truck that's really very funny and clever. And there's this whole sequence which you would have seen in the trailers if you watched them, where they're all having a family day all together, do different things, and a piece of glass falls into this, and all of these things unfold, and we see something that transpires we saw in the trailer. I kind of wish this wasn't part of the marketing, as it would have been a really surprising and fun moment for us, not knowing what was going to happen, but because they used it in the marketing, we kind of knew what was coming. But it was still really fun and effective, and that sequence is really good. And there's a really great sequence at the end of the film involving a camper van and this sort of death trap house. This is really well done as well, and it keeps you surprised and shocked along the way. That's something I've always really enjoyed about these sort of films, the Final Destination movies and the kills in them, is they're very drawn out. They aren't just straight away, like a killer appears and kills someone. There's like drawn out, and we see things unfold and certain things happen, and that leads to what transpires. And I think that's really, really great, and I love that sort of about the deaths. What this film also does that the other films have kind of touched on briefly is the idea, what if death isn't after them? What if it's something they've created in their head? And what if all the actions that they do and the way they sort of deal with what they're confronted with is the cause of what happens to them? And this sort of really goes into that a lot more. And I really liked that. I felt that was kind of an interesting aspect to look at, and an interesting direction to take the concept of the whole film into. The final scene in the film involves a train, and I was in tears of laughter. This was so funny, the ending, like what they do with it. But by far, the best sequence in this whole film is the opening. It is the best opening in the whole Final Destination series. It is just so well done. It's so drawn out and very creative. Involves people being in somewhere high, and they're dancing on a glass dance floor, and you can see how high they are on the ground below them, and it sort of starts to crack. It's just very effectively done, and everything it transpires, and there's some great moments, characters that are annoying and a pain in the ass sort of get theirs. Just the way it's orchestrated, you can tell a lot of their budget into this sequence, and it's the best sequence. It's just so well done. It's drawn out, it's creative and interesting. The death scenes are really fascinating and fun and entertaining, and it really sort of transports you back to a different period, which I really loved. I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it. But the problem with opening so strong and so creatively with a sequence like this is they struggle to know where to go after that. And none of the death scenes or anything after this is as good. It is still well done, and I do love the death sequences as I mentioned. But this was just such a high point, and the film sort of slowed down a bit, to introduce the characters and the family and the dynamics between the family, any difficulties that these characters are facing. But it isn't until the midway point when I sort of got back on board with the film. I'm not saying anything previous to the opening to this and till we got to this midway point wasn't good. I still liked it, but I wasn't invested. I wasn't as interested in these particular sequences. But after the first few deaths happened and misdirection with particular character, I really felt invested, and I went on the journey with it. And as we got towards the end, it felt a little rushed, but as we got towards the end, I was like, this is great, what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And it gets to a point and something happens, and I felt a little disappointed in that moment. But then as we got to the end, that really picked it up for me. This is not a perfect film by any means, but it is an interesting movie. It is something that is definitely, like I mentioned, one of the best sequels in the series, and I just really like the choices they make throughout it. The main character I mightn't love to begin with, but she grows on me. It felt to me a lot of the side characters in the film were the far more interesting ones, or the comic relief character that we have, who does serve a purpose in the movie, but he's very funny, and he has a really great sequence in a tattoo shop that you would have seen from the marketing and some of the trailers that they provided for us when sort of showing this particular film. But it's really fun and creatively done. I like the concept. There's a character that creates, I guess it's a spoiler in a way, creates a book. And that book is a connection to everything that transpired in this particular character's vision at the beginning of the movie. So it kind of is this sort of Bible, so to speak, or this sort of particular book that gives the next person information. And they sort of talk about why this family hasn't been affected before or previous to what transpires for them in this movie. And they explain that in an interesting way, and it's kind of like someone keeping it at bay, so to speak, and then it's released, and then we see how it transpires. And while I was watching this with my friend, he was talking about how interesting would it be if they had a Final Destination movie where there was no death's plan or death chasing them. It was just a creation in their mind, believing that this was after them and their choices started to affect what happens. And I thought that could have been an interesting film as well. This really talks about timelines and families, and there are so many more timelines that they don't touch upon in this particular film. And I really feel they could have done a new trilogy and sort of explored different families, and then sort of how it all came together in the third one. I'd love to see that, and I hope they do sort of pursue it a bit more. While this wasn't long enough to really go into the depths and answer all the questions that I had, it answered enough of them. It answered them to a point that I can be satisfied with certain things. Even though I want to know more, it's kind of really satisfying. They never really talk about like why death chooses these people, and that's something I would like to know more about. And why only certain people have these particular visions. Why are they picked? Is that death doing it, or is it something else much higher, trying to protect the person or give them some sort of warning? I want to know more about that. And I know most fans of this series probably don't care too much about that stuff. They just enjoy the death scenes and all that. And look, this has all of that and you'll enjoy it. I just want to know a bit more, that's all. I had a great experience with this film. The cinema of people that we had were really good, and we just sort of had a fun experience with it. It just had a fun time with it. It has a lot of humor, which you expect. Like I mentioned many times, the death scenes are really great and creative. And there's some interesting characters, and there's some interesting directions that they take the story and how they explore it a bit more than what we'd seen in the previous incarnations of this series. And like I mentioned, it's nearly as good as the first, but the first has a personal impact for me in seeing it when I did, the actors that were in it, the connection that I have because it is a 25-year-old film. There is something about it that I really drawn to and connect to and really love. That just has, this is the best for me. In that the opening is really great in the first one with the plane exploding, but it's just the way it unfolds and the characters and the journey we go on. They keep it at a level playing field with the beginning and as the film unfolds. And I think the story's a little better. Where this one starts really strong, falls down a little bit, and then picks itself back up. And that's why it comes just under the first one for me. And then the second, then the third, and then the fifth, and then the fourth to last. But this is just a great fun horror film. If you like the series, you get a kick out of it. And it is a very impressive installment in this particular franchise. Anyway, that's it. That's all from me. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, put in comments below what you thought of this movie, if you've seen it, and if you haven't seen it, just what your expectations or what you're looking forward to seeing in it. Until next time, enjoy the movies.